The title of yesterday's episode was Tipping Point, and that's because I truly believe that the Giants are at a tipping point, and that this is a critical portion of the schedule, especially playing the Phillies, just in the here and now, a team that the Giants hopefully will be competing against when all is said and done at the end of the year for a wild card spot. And so a huge Game 1 win for the Giants. We'll break down how they did it next.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And coming up on today's show, I'm not kidding. I guess it wasn't the title of the episode, but on the graphic out on YouTube and posting on social media, I wrote in giant letters, tipping point. And I really feel like that is the juncture of the season at which the Giants find themselves, because going into last night, they were 17-23. And like I said, you're playing the Phillies, a team that, let's be honest, the Phillies and Giants have almost identical runs scored and runs allowed in the same number of games. They've played 41 games each. The Phillies have scored 176 runs. The Giants have scored 179. They were tied going into yesterday. The Giants have allowed 203 runs. The Phillies have allowed 201. So the Phillies have a minus 25 run differential. The Giants are at minus 24. So by that, the Giants have been one run better than the Phillies. But record-wise, the Phillies have actually outperformed their run differential a little bit by a couple wins, and the Giants are playing to their expected win-loss record. But this is a team, when all is said and done, there are a handful of teams. There's some surprise teams right now in the Pirates and the Cubs and the Marlins and the D-backs. The D-backs are a real problem, and so losing 3 out of 4 hurt the Giants significantly there. But so like I said, if the Giants were to get swept by the Phillies, it could just really, really put them in a hole. Whereas if you can go out there and, sweep the Phillies, it can really, really increase your chances. And so they're at a critical juncture. And so to see them go out and win a game that didn't start great for the Giants, it was kind of classic Giants in that they loaded the bases with 1 out and they were just not able to do anything in the first inning, with Mitch Haniger just continuing his major struggles at the plate, striking out in that situation. The Phillies went with an opener, so it was a right-on-right matchup for Haniger, but still, he's not a platoon player. He's a guy who's historically been significantly better than average against right-handed pitching and then just a monster against left-handed pitching, but we have not seen that Mitch Haniger thus far. But so then in the next inning, the top of the second, the Phillies get a couple runs on a Alec Boehm 2-run homer. And so it's starting to smell like a loss already. And by the way, Alex Wood making his first start since injuring his hamstring about a month ago. And so that was great. And we're going to later talk about the quote unquote controversy about him coming out of the game with a lead after, being 1 out away from qualifying for a pitcher win. So we'll get into that topic in great detail a little bit later. But I just want to mention the Giants answered back. Once again, they loaded the bases in the second inning, and this time they took advantage. There were some Phillies mistakes for sure. Really, just the one ended up mattering in that there was a ground ball to Trey Turner, and he threw to Bryson Stott for a force out at second base, and Stott just simply dropped the ball. It was right to him. and he just dropped it. And apparently it's the first error of his career. And this is a guy who played a lot last year as well as a rookie, and obviously he's played this year as well. So a great time from a Giants fan's perspective for that first error for Bryson Stott. And then I think it was the next batter, Nick Castellanos, dropped a fly ball, but they ended up getting a force out at second. Not great base running by Tyro Estrada, who went back to tag up on a shallowish fly ball to right field. It doesn't really make any sense. I guess he thought if the throw was going to come home, he might go to second, but really it's kind of a situation where you want to go halfway. So I thought that was potentially going to be a big mistake, but what happened next was Michael Conforto, who was just on a tear, came up and hit an opposite field 3-run homer, just hooked it, sliced it just inside the left field foul pole. And for Michael Conforto now, in his last 7 games, he's hitting .364. He's got a .462 on base, and how about this? A .955 slugging. His strikeout rate during that time is only 3.8%. He's only struck out in 1 game out of those 7, and walk rate of 15.4%. So I kind of saw this coming early on. I was saying he was having better at bats and that he looked like he was coming out of it. And sure enough, he's been on a tear. And so that's the thing when we talk about Mitch Haniger. And if you listened to yesterday's episode, hopefully, the everydayers, I hope there's a lot of you. That was the main theme, was that the Giants have a number of veteran players such as Conforto, Haniger, Stripling, Manaea, Taylor Rogers, performing just well below their career numbers. And so you just, at least some of these guys, you expect to at least get somewhere near their career numbers when all is said and done, because that's just what veteran players with track records do. You don't generally just see them. I mean, if they're 40 years old, you might say, okay, yeah, we expect age-related decline to have set in a major way, but they're not. These guys are 30 years old, and so we're seeing it with Conforto, and I think eventually, if Mitch Haniger can stay healthy, we're going to see it with him as well. I'm less confident in the pitchers, but I think that the Giants have some answers with Wood coming back, and then potentially Kyle Harrison or Keaton Winn coming up from the minor leagues to fill out that rotation. And so, I don't know. I just don't think it's crazy at all to be a little bit optimistic about the Giants, but they just have to do it. They have to go out there and win these games, and they've got another one 2 more coming up against the Phillies, and then the Marlins coming into town afterwards. So coming up in just a minute, a little bit more from this game, the Giants defense on display, and we'll also get into the Alex Wood controversy, non-controversy. The Giants were absolutely right to pull him from the game, even though he was 1 out away from a win. I'll explain from qualifying for a win. I'll explain why in just a minute. But before we do, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't have to be so stressful. And for me, one of the things that I worry about so much is that I'm not getting the best price. I do not want to overpay, find out later, oh, look, there was a ticket in that same area that was significantly cheaper, and I made a big mistake pulling the trigger when I did, and I overpaid, and I do not like that one bit. And also, not knowing what the view looks like from the seat is also a problem I've run into before. But all of that is solved with Game Time. They've got images of seat views and the lowest price guarantee. That Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game changer. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, here we go. Just a little bit more from this game. I want to call out the defense, a little bit about Casey Schmitt just having a game that the everydayers heard me yesterday talking about one area of concern I had about Schmitt, and then he went out and had another excellent game, including defensively. So thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. The everydayers tomorrow will hear us breaking down this great pitching matchup in Game 2. Alex Cobb leading at least the National League, but maybe even all of baseball. I heard John Miller say that. I thought it was just the NL, but Alex Cobb having a great year, not a surprise to me, versus Zach Wheeler, one of the better pitchers in the NL. So a good pitching matchup, and we'll be breaking it down. The Giants play these Phillies tonight at 6:45 Pacific, and you can catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. So anyway, I just want to call out the defense. There were some brilliant defensive plays in this game that made a big difference, in that Bryce Johnson made two really nice plays in center field. And, you know, he hasn't hit much. He did have a hit that kind of set up the rally. He and Casey Schmitt set up that 6-run inning. That was the only inning in which the Giants scored at all. And so kudos to him there. But two nice catches in one inning for Bryce Johnson, like the second one being just really nice and would have been maybe a triple. I think it was off the bat of Trey Turner. And then Casey Schmitt playing his first ever game at second base. Now he's played short, he's played third, and now he's played second in a span of like 7 games. And I think he started every single day since getting called up. And so it was like a sliding play to his right up the middle, got up, bobbled the ball a little bit, but still got a grip and threw the runner out. So it was just a really nice play by Schmitt. And then J.D. Davis in the 9th inning, snagging a line drive that would have been all kinds of trouble, with the Giants bullpen being a little bit shaky again, with Taylor Rogers having issues with command again and Doval having issues with command. He got, frankly, helped out by the umpire on a strike one call with, I think, Alec Boehm at the plate. I think it was Alec Boehm. Should have been ball 2-0, but instead it was 1-1, and it made a big difference. But J.D. Davis leaping catch, his improved defense, huge bright spot for the Giants in the first quarter of the season. But let's turn our attention to this Alex Wood controversy, non-controversy. My take, it was 100% the right decision to pull Alex Wood, despite the fact that he was 1 out away from qualifying for a win. And there are a number of reasons that I believe this. First and foremost, and this is like where I put 95% of the weight of this argument, is that he was on a strict pitch count that they knew coming into the game. They told him about coming into the game. He knew how many pitches he had to work with, and he had surpassed it by 7. He said that they told him the pitch count was 65. And, I suppose, if you're in the middle of an at-bat, like, you're not just going to take him out right at 65. And so he did pass it and get to, I think, 72. But look, the argument that some will make is that pitchers really want the win. He's 1 out away, and you should just like go against your own rules. But when it comes to player safety and health, that is just where I draw the line and say you have no argument to make on this, because the idea that they should, it's not just Gabe Kapler coming up with these pitch counts, right? It's like the medical staff. And believe it or not, like, pitcher injuries happen all the time, and we're seeing it across baseball this year. Injuries are up, and this guy is coming off an injury, Alex Wood, and he's not built up. He hasn't thrown high pitch counts. He made 1 rehab start, and it was like 3 innings. And so to just compromise potentially his arm for the sake of getting him a meaningless statistic, it has nothing to do with the team win. It's a statistic, or it's not even really a statistic. It's just a number that a pitcher can get. And I understand. Here's the thing, is that I want to emphasize that I understand it matters to the players. But first of all, it shouldn't, because as time goes on in this game, the win has become far less important than it used to be. Used to be, when we didn't have better metrics for evaluating players, that win-loss record was important for evaluating players. But these days, I can guarantee you with 100% confidence that no front office in Major League Baseball gives 1 iota of care to a pitcher's win-loss record when they're evaluating the player. And so it matters to the players, but it doesn't matter to the evaluators. And so look, under different circumstances, if he's not on a pitch count and you have a big enough lead, let him have at it. Even though it's not a great matchup, and that's the thing too. It's like third time through the order, Alex Wood got torched last season, and he's facing Trey Turner, who hit a rocket double off of him in his first at bat. And like I said a minute ago with the Bryce Johnson catch, I believe that was also Trey Turner, a rocket into the right center field gap. And so you're playing with fire. Like, he's probably going to give up a homer, like, honestly, if he faces Trey Turner for the third time, having two excellent at bats already against him. But if your lead is big enough, say 4 or 5 runs, and the pitch count is low enough that you're not worried about his health, let him have at it. Give him an opportunity. Even come out and tell him, look, this is your last hitter. Go get him. And if you don't, we're going to take you out. But you're going to get a shot here to finish this inning. But under the circumstances, with a 65 pitch limit, and he was at 72, that's it. I don't care. It's not about third time through the order. It's not about Trey Turner, even though those are valid arguments, very valid arguments. It's about protecting the health and safety of the players. And so for just randos on Twitter and former players on Twitter to just think that they know, to think that they are smarter or have a better idea about player safety than the doctors who are trying to help keep these guys healthy, which, by the way, has huge ramifications for the team. You need this guy healthy. And so the idea that you should risk his health so he can get a meaningless, to evaluators, I understand it matters to him, but at the end of the day, meaningless stat. Like, his 4 2/3 innings of good pitching are going on his record, and that's what teams look at to evaluate a guy. And so I get it. It's frustrating to be 1 out away, but he also knew going into the game that these were the circumstances. So this is a non-story, in my opinion. And if it's a 1-run game and he's not on a pitch limit, I still say take him out. I do not care. The manager is in charge. The players are not in charge. I understand you don't want to upset your players, but it's kind of an insane thing to me where certain people, a lot of them, will tell you that you'd rather put your team in a worse position in order to maybe get that guy the win than put your team in a better position by making the correct kind of statistically move. And so this is a debate. I understand people will make that argument, and I get it. I understand that you want to, if you put faith in your players and then they come through, then they feel good and they like playing for you and blah, 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 all that stuff. But really, the solution here is that the players need to get it out of their head that the wins and losses matter, because it does not matter to anyone who's evaluating them. It only matters to them themselves. And so anyway, no brainer, simply because of the health and safety and the strict pitch count limit. You're not just going to exceed it by 15 pitches just to get the guy a win. Crazy, insane, makes no sense. No chance was he staying in that game. Easy decision. So coming up in just a minute, we've got some roster moves, two surprising moves, with someone going on the injured list and someone coming off the injured list, and plus an update on Tony DeSclafani. We haven't mentioned this, but dropped a piano bench on his toe, and that's why he came out of the game the other day. What's the status with him moving forward? We'll get into it in just a minute, but first. All right, as promised, we've got some surprising IL moves, with one player going on the injured list somewhat unexpectedly, and one player coming off, not necessarily unexpectedly, but sooner than initially expected. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, tomorrow, we're going to be breaking down Game 2 with a great pitching matchup. Usually when we say it's a great pitching matchup, it ends up being 11-8. And so we'll see how it plays out. But, I really am a fan of Alex Cobb, and Zach Wheeler is, former Giants prospect. Zach Wheeler has gone on to have a really nice career and is one of the better pitchers in the NL. So it's a good matchup. Giants play those Phillies tonight at 6:45 Pacific catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. So the roster moves. Joc Pederson, who was hit in the hand, goes on the injured list retroactive to May 13th. And so they used this move. He was hit in the hand by a pitch, and basically they needed to activate Mike Yastrzemski. And that's the other surprising roster move to me, because it feels like the Giants were just in Mexico City. It was a couple weeks ago at least now, but he injured it in Mexico City, and it looked pretty serious. Like I thought we're talking about at least a month, maybe 6 weeks to 8 weeks with that kind of a hamstring pull. But I don't have the schedule pulled up, but I believe he was out like two and a half weeks at most with this. And so that is great to see, because Yastrzemski was having a very nice season for the San Francisco Giants. One of the better seasons of anybody. I mean, you've got Tyro, you've got JD Davis, you've got Lamont, Wade Jr., and then like Yaz basically was the next best player, and an important player. In center field, they've kind of, we've seen like Cal Stevenson, and some people think Bryce Johnson is more deserving than Yastrzemski, and you're blowing me up on Twitter about it, but just look at the offensive numbers and try to make that case to me, and it's going to be tough. And Yastrzemski's also a good defender out there, maybe not quite as good as Bryce Johnson, but Yastrzemski's bat just probably going to be significantly better than Bryce Johnson. And right now you don't have Austin Slater, who's also on the injured list, right? They put him on the IL? I believe so. So many roster moves get made. But Austin Slater injured his hamstring, and so I believe he's on the injured list. And so it's probably going to be a platoon with Johnson starting against left-handed pitching and Yastrzemski against right-handed pitching in center field. And so, yeah, I think that's a pretty good situation, and it's great to have Yastrzemski back. But it stinks to lose Joc Pederson to the injured list, because he's just, against a right-handed pitcher, slotted into that DH spot. He's just a threat every time. And so initially the Giants had fears that he had broken a bone in his hand. And so the x-rays coming back negative is actually a huge blessing, and they're fortunate that that was the case. And I'm glad that it turned out that way, but it's bothering him enough that they, shut him down for, it was retroactive to the 13th. So he'll be out until about the 23rd at least. And in the meantime, what this does though, is it creates more opportunities for Casey Schmitt, because it allows them, like last night, they used Tyro Estrada at DH, get Estrada off his feet a little bit for a game, and then insert Casey Schmitt at second. And then, a game like tonight, I wouldn't be surprised if JD Davis goes to DH and Casey Schmitt plays third. Just the ability to use that DH spot for other players, or you could just put, I guess I want to say put like Wilmer Flores at DH, but where does Casey Schmitt fit? That's going to be such an interesting thing to follow moving forward, especially when Joc Pederson comes back, and you've got Davis playing great at third base, hitting and defensively. Brandon Crawford, the incumbent at shortstop. Case to be made that maybe Casey Schmitt should play a lot at shortstop, even over Brandon Crawford potentially. And then Tyro Estrada is not going anywhere at second. And of course, Lamont Wade Jr. is pretty entrenched at first. And so that'll be something to watch. But for now, with Pederson going on the IL, I think it creates pretty much daily opportunities for Schmitt if they want to keep his bat in the lineup, which they should. He and his glove on the field. He had another good game yesterday, 2 more hits, and wasn't really chasing out of the zone, which is what my one concern was about his first handful of games, was that there was too much chase, especially in the last couple games in Arizona. And so lastly, Tony DeSclafani apparently dropped a piano bench on his toe trying to help his son get off the bench. And this was several weeks ago, and I guess it just slowly, the toenail started to like fall off. And so that's why he was pulled from his most recent start in like the 5th inning, I think it was, and with a low pitch count, because the nail falling off was bothering him. And so they're going to remove the nail, or they think it's going to just come off naturally. He's going to have no toenail. The whole thing sounds gross and painful, but the update is that Kapler said he's optimistic DeSclafani will be able to make his next scheduled start, though the Giants will have a better sense of his status once the nail comes off. In the meantime, DeSclafani plans to stay away from tickling the ivories. I believe this is, I'm just like quoting Maria Guardado, and that's a beautiful phrase there, tickling the ivories. So anyway, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Every dayers tomorrow breaking down. Like I said, they're still at a tipping point. It was great to get that first win, but keep your foot on the gas here and just do what you can to at least win this series. You've won game one. They won game one in Arizona, but then couldn't get the job done and even split that 4-game series. Now you've won game one here. Keep your foot on the throttle, and the everydayers will be hearing us break it down. Catch every pitch of the Giants' hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search Giants. Giants play the Phillies tonight at 6:45 Pacific. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. It helps me out tremendously. So thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again tomorrow. Thanks again for listening. You are now Locked On Giants.